The sound that woke Janelle Williams from her peaceful sleep at 3:47 a.m. was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was a combination of gasping, choking, and something that could only be described as the sound of a soul fighting to stay inside a body. The noise came through the thin walls of her apartment, carried by the wind from the towering glass building across the street where she worked nights as a cleaning lady. Janelle sat up in bed, her heart racing. She had been cleaning offices for 15 years and she knew the sounds of a building at night. This was different. This was wrong. The gasping continued, desperate and raw, echoing through the quiet city streets. She grabbed her phone, threw on her uniform, and ran toward Memorial Hospital's research building where she worked. The security guard at the front desk looked surprised to see her. "Janelle, your shift doesn't start for 3 hours." "I heard something," she said, breathing hard. "Someone's in trouble upstairs." They took the elevator to the 40th floor, where the executive offices were located. The gasping sound grew louder as they approached the corner office belonging to Robert Sterling, the tech billionaire who had donated millions to the hospital's research programs. The door was unlocked. Inside, they found Robert Sterling on the floor of his office, surrounded by scattered papers and an overturned coffee cup. He was conscious but struggling to breathe, his face pale and sweaty. His eyes were wide with terror, and his hands clawed at his throat as if something invisible was choking him. "Call 911, Janelle shouted to the security guard while she knelt beside Robert. She had taken basic first aid classes, but this was unlike anything she had seen. His pulse was racing, his breathing was shallow and rapid, but there were no obvious injuries. No blood, no signs of a heart attack or stroke. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. Robert's eyes locked onto hers and she saw something that made her stomach turn. It wasn't just fear in his eyes. It was confusion, as if he couldn't understand what was happening to his own body. The paramedics arrived within minutes, followed by Dr. Harrison, the hospital's chief of emergency medicine. As they worked on Robert, Janelle stepped back and watched. She had always been observant, a skill that served her well in her cleaning job. She noticed things others missed. While the medical team focused on Robert's vital signs, Janelle looked around the office. Something felt wrong about the space itself. The air seemed thick, almost heavy. There was a strange smell, sweet but unpleasant, that she couldn't identify. The plants in the corner of the office looked wilted, their leaves brown around the edges. "His oxygen levels are normal," Dr. Harrison said, frowning. "Heart rate is elevated, but the EKG looks good. Blood pressure is high, but not dangerously so." Robert tried to speak, but only managed a whispered "can't." "Breathe." As they loaded him onto a stretcher, Robert's eyes found Janelle again. He reached out weakly and she took his hand. "Help me," he whispered so quietly that only she could hear. The ambulance rushed Robert to the emergency room, leaving Janelle alone in the office with the security guard. She should have gone home, but something kept her there. She walked slowly around the office, her cleaning lady instincts kicking in. She noticed that the carpet near Robert's desk was slightly damp, even though there was no sign of spilled liquid. The air conditioning vent above his desk was making a soft humming sound that seemed different from the others. "Strange night," the security guard said, shaking his head. "Mr. Sterling seemed fine when he came in around midnight, said he couldn't sleep and wanted to work on some project." Janelle nodded, but her attention was caught by something else. On Robert's desk, partially hidden under the scattered papers, was a small potted plant she had never seen before. It was unlike the other plants in the office. This one had thick, waxy leaves and tiny white flowers that gave off that sweet, unpleasant smell she had noticed earlier. She started to reach for it, then stopped. Something about the plant made her uncomfortable. It looked innocent enough, but there was something about the way it seemed to glisten in the office lighting that made her pull her hand back. "I need to get to the hospital," she told the security guard. "Can you lock up here?" At the hospital, Janelle found chaos in the emergency room. Robert Sterling's condition had worsened during the transport. His breathing was more labored, and he was having trouble staying conscious. Dr. Harrison was consulting with a cardiologist, a neurologist, and a toxicologist, but none of them could explain what was happening. "His blood work is coming back normal," Dr. Harrison said to his colleagues. No signs of poisoning, no drugs in his system, no indication of any kind of infection or disease. Janelle approached the nurse's station. "Excuse me, I'm the one who found Mr. Sterling. Is there anything I can do to help?" The nurse looked at her with surprise. "Are you family?" "No, I work in his building. I clean his office." The nurse's expression changed slightly, becoming more dismissive. "I'm sorry, but only family members can get information about patients." But Dr. Harrison overheard and walked over. "You're the one who found him." "Yes, sir, I heard him from my apartment across the street. The sound was terrible." Dr. Harrison studied her face. "You heard him from across the street. That's quite a distance." "I know it sounds strange, but I did, and there was something else." Janelle hesitated, knowing how crazy she might sound. "There was a plant in his office, a small one on his desk. I've been cleaning that office for 3 years, and I've never seen that plant before." Dr. Harrison frowned. "A plant?" "Yes, sir, it had a sweet smell, but not a good sweet. And the other plants in the office looked sick." The doctor exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Could you describe this plant?" Janelle described the plant as best she could, and she watched as the doctor's expressions grew more serious. The toxicologist, Dr. Chen, stepped forward. "That sounds like it could be a member of the Apocynaceae family," he said. "Some of those plants can be toxic if the oils are released into the air." "But his blood work is clean, Doctor," Harrison pointed out. "Not all plant toxins show up in standard blood tests," Dr. Chen replied. "And if it's an airborne toxin, it might not even enter the bloodstream in detectable amounts." They decided to send a team back to Robert's office to collect the plant and test the air quality. Meanwhile, Robert's condition continued to deteriorate. His breathing became more shallow, and his skin took on a grayish color that terrified Janelle. She found herself thinking about her grandmother, who had raised her in rural Alabama. Grandmother Williams had been a wise woman who knew about plants and their effects on people. She had taught Janelle that plants could heal, but they could also harm. More importantly, she had taught her that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. As the hours passed and more specialists arrived to examine Robert, Janelle stayed nearby. She had nowhere else to go, and something inside her told her that she needed to be there. She watched as doctor after doctor tried different treatments, but nothing seemed to help. The strange thing was that Robert's condition seemed to stabilize whenever she was in the room. The nurses noticed it too, though they didn't say anything. When Janelle stepped out to get coffee or use the bathroom, Robert's breathing would become more labored. When she returned, he would calm down slightly. "It's like he knows you're there," one of the nurses whispered to her during the early morning hours. Janelle looked at Robert's pale face and remembered the way he had looked at her in his office. There had been something in his eyes, a recognition of sorts, not romantic but something deeper. As if he knew, somehow, that she was important to what was happening to him. As the sun began to rise over the city, Robert Sterling's condition took another turn for the worse. His breathing became so labored that Dr. Harrison made the decision to put him on a ventilator. But even with the machine helping him breathe, his body seemed to be fighting a battle that the doctors couldn't understand. "I've never seen anything like this, Doctor," Harrison admitted to his team. "It's as if his body is rejecting something, but we can't identify what." Janelle, who had been listening from the hallway, felt a chill run down her spine. She thought again about her grandmother's teachings, about the plants that could heal and harm. And she began to wonder if the answer to Robert Sterling's problem might be found not in modern medicine, but in the old wisdom that her grandmother had passed down to her. The first chapter of what would become the most extraordinary night of her life was just beginning. The team that Dr. Harrison sent to Robert Sterling's office returned with troubling news. The plant that Janelle had described was indeed toxic, but it wasn't just any ordinary poisonous plant. It was a rare species that Dr. Chen had only read about in medical journals from tropical regions. "It's called Nerium indicum," Dr. Chen explained to the gathered medical team. "It's extremely rare in North America. The oils from its flowers can cause respiratory distress, but here's the strange part: the plant we found in Mr. Sterling's office appears to have been deliberately cultivated to maximize its toxic properties. Dr. Harrison frowned. You're saying someone placed this plant there intentionally. That's what it looks like. The soil composition, the specific nutrients used to grow it, even the way it was positioned to catch the air circulation from the vents, everything suggests this was planned. The implications were staggering. Someone had tried to poison Robert Sterling using a method so sophisticated that it had fooled 10 of the country's best doctors. But why? And more importantly, how could they counteract the effects when they still didn't fully understand how the poison worked? Janelle, who had been quietly listening from the hallway, felt her heart race. She had seen something like this before, not in person, but in the stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories about plants that could be used as both medicine and poison, depending on how they were prepared and used. She approached Dr. Harrison carefully. "Doctor, may I ask you something?" He looked up from the chart he was studying. "Of course, you've been helpful so far. When you tested the air in Mr. Sterling's office, did you find anything unusual about the humidity levels?" Dr. Chen looked surprised. "Actually, yes. The humidity was much higher than normal for that building. We assumed it was from a malfunctioning air conditioning system." Janelle nodded. "And the temperature?" "Slightly warmer than the other offices." "Why do you ask?" "My grandmother used to tell me stories about certain plants that only release their strongest oils under specific conditions. High humidity and warm temperatures could make a plant like that much more dangerous." The doctors exchanged glances. This cleaning lady was asking questions that none of them had thought to ask. Dr. Harrison made a decision. "Ms. Williams, would you be willing to help us? You seem to have knowledge about plants that might be useful." Janelle felt a mixture of pride and fear. "I'll help however I can, but I should tell you I'm not a doctor. I just learned things from my grandmother." "Sometimes the best medicine comes from the oldest sources," Dr. Harrison said kindly. They brought Janelle into the conference room where Robert's case was being discussed. On the table were photos of the plant, air quality reports, and Robert's medical charts. As Janelle looked at the pictures, she felt a chill of recognition. "I've seen this plant before," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. "Where?" Dr. Chen asked. "Not in person, but in my grandmother's old journals. She used to keep notes about plants and their properties. She learned from her grandmother, who learned from hers. This plant, it's not supposed to be here. It's from a place where the air is always humid and warm." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "What else do you remember about it?" Janelle closed her eyes, trying to recall her grandmother's stories. She said that this plant was used by people who wanted to make someone sick without anyone knowing what was causing it. The person would get sicker and sicker, but doctors wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with them. "That matches what we're seeing with Mr. Sterling," Dr. Chen said grimly. "But grandmother also said that for every plant that could harm, there was usually another plant that could heal." Janelle opened her eyes. She said that the people who used this poison plant also knew about the antidote. "Doctor," Harrison felt a spark of hope. "Do you know what the antidote is?" Janelle shook her head. "Not exactly, but I know where we might find the answer." She explained that her grandmother's journals were stored in a trunk in her apartment. The journals contained generations of plant knowledge passed down through her family. If there was an antidote to the poison affecting Robert Sterling, it might be recorded in those pages. "But there's a problem," Janelle continued. "The journals are written in a mixture of English and an old dialect that I don't fully understand. And some of the plant names are in languages I don't recognize." Dr. Harrison made another quick decision. "We'll figure it out. Can you get the journals?" While Janelle went to retrieve her grandmother's journals, the medical team continued to monitor Robert's condition. He was stable on the ventilator, but his body was clearly fighting a battle. His temperature fluctuated, his heart rate remained elevated, and most concerning of all, his oxygen levels were slowly declining despite the machine breathing for him. Dr. Harrison called in favors from colleagues around the world. If this was an exotic poison, he needed experts who understood tropical plants and their effects on the human body. Within hours, he had botanists, toxicologists, and traditional medicine experts consulting on the case via video conference. But as the hours passed, Robert's condition continued to worsen. The exotic poison was winning the battle, and modern medicine seemed powerless to stop it. Janelle returned with a small, worn trunk that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside were dozens of journals, notebooks, and loose papers covered in faded handwriting. The smell of old paper and dried herbs filled the conference room as she opened the trunk. She started keeping these journals when she was just a girl, Janelle explained. Her grandmother taught her that knowledge was the most valuable thing you could pass down to the next generation. Dr. Chen picked up one of the journals and flipped through it carefully. The pages were filled with detailed drawings of plants, notes about their properties, and recipes for various remedies. Some pages were in clear English, others in what appeared to be a dialect he didn't recognize. "This is incredible," he said. "Your grandmother documented things that aren't in any modern medical textbook." They divided the journals among the team and began searching for any reference to the poison plant or its antidote. It was slow work, made more difficult by the mixture of languages and the faded handwriting. But gradually, they began to piece together a picture of how the plant worked and what might counteract its effects. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen found a page with a detailed drawing of the poison plant. Next to it was another drawing of a much simpler plant, with notes in English about how it could cleanse the air that makes people sick. "Look at this," he called to the others. "The antidote plant is much more common. It's actually a type of mint that grows in most temperate climates." Janelle looked at the drawing and felt her heart sink. "That's not just any mint. That's a specific variety that my grandmother called healing mint. It's different from regular mint." "Different how?" Dr. Harrison asked. "It has to be prepared in a very specific way. The oils have to be extracted using a method that my grandmother learned from her grandmother. And it has to be fresh, it can't be dried or processed." The team looked at each other. They had found the antidote, but they still didn't have the actual remedy. The healing mint had to be prepared correctly, and only Janelle had the knowledge to do it. But there was another problem. "Where do we find this healing mint?" Dr. Harrison asked. Janelle thought for a moment. "My grandmother used to grow it in her garden. When she died, I transplanted some of it to a community garden near my apartment. I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's worth checking." As they prepared to send someone to search for the healing mint, Robert's condition took another turn for the worse. His oxygen levels dropped to dangerous levels, and his heart rate became irregular. Dr. Harrison made the difficult decision to put him on more intensive life support. "We're running out of time," he told the team. "If we don't find a way to counteract this poison soon, we're going to lose him." Janelle felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This man's life depended on her grandmother's knowledge and her ability to remember the old ways. But as she looked at Robert's pale face through the window of his room, she felt something else too: determination. Her grandmother had taught her that healing was about more than just medicine. It was about caring for people and never giving up on them. "I'll find the mint," she said firmly, "and I'll prepare it the way my grandmother taught me. We're going to save him." But as she left the hospital to search for the healing mint, Janelle couldn't shake the feeling that someone didn't want Robert Sterling to recover. The poison plant hadn't appeared in his office by accident. Someone had put it there, knowing exactly what it would do to him. And if that someone discovered that an antidote existed, they might try to stop her from using it. The race to save Robert Sterling's life was just beginning, and Janelle was about to discover that sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places. By the time Janelle returned from her search for the healing mint, Robert Sterling's hospital room had been transformed into something resembling a medical convention. 10 of the country's most renowned specialists had been called in to consult on the case, and each had brought their own team of assistants and equipment. Dr. Patricia Morgan, a toxicologist from Johns Hopkins, stood at the foot of Robert's bed studying his latest blood work. "I've never seen a toxin that affects the respiratory system this way without showing up in standard tests," she said to Dr. Harrison. "It's like the poison is hiding in plain sight." Dr. James Liu, a neurologist from the Mayo Clinic, was examining Robert's reflexes. There's definitely some kind of neurological component here. His responses are sluggish, but not in a way that suggests typical poisoning. Dr. Sarah Davidson, a cardiologist from Cleveland Clinic, was monitoring Robert's heart function. The cardiac effects are the most puzzling. His heart is working harder than it should, but there's no apparent damage to the muscle tissue. As Janelle entered the room carrying a small cloth bag, she was overwhelmed by the number of people and machines surrounding Robert. He looked so small and fragile connected to all the tubes and monitors. His face was pale, and even with the ventilator breathing for him, his body seemed to be struggling. Dr. Harrison noticed her and approached. "Did you find the mint?" Janelle nodded, opening the bag to show him the fresh green leaves she had carefully harvested from the community garden. "It's here, but it's not much. This variety doesn't grow in large quantities." "Doctor," Morgan overheard and walked over. "Excuse me, but what exactly are you planning to do with garden mint? This patient has been poisoned with a sophisticated plant toxin. He needs advanced medical treatment, not folk remedies." Janelle felt her cheeks flush. She had expected this reaction, but it still stung. "I understand your concern, doctor, but this isn't just any mint. It's specifically cultivated to counteract the effects of the poison plant we found in his office." Dr. Liu joined the conversation. "With all due respect, ma'am, I'm sure you mean well, but we can't risk experimental treatments on a patient this critical. We need to stick to proven medical protocols." "But your proven medical protocols aren't working," Janelle said quietly. "He's been getting worse for hours despite everything you've tried." Dr. Harrison held up his hand. "Let's not dismiss any options too quickly. Ms. Williams has been remarkably accurate in her observations so far. What exactly would you need to do to prepare this remedy?" Janelle explained the process her grandmother had taught her. The mint leaves had to be crushed in a specific way to release their oils. Then they had to be steeped in hot water at a precise temperature for exactly 7 minutes. The resulting liquid had to be used within 15 minutes of preparation, or it would lose its effectiveness. "And how would it be administered?" Dr. Davidson asked. "The traditional way would be to have the patient breathe the steam from the preparation, but since he's on a ventilator," Janelle trailed off, realizing she hadn't thought through this complication. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly listening, stepped forward. "We could introduce the steam into his oxygen supply. It would be like aromatherapy but with therapeutic intent." Dr. Morgan shook her head. "This is ridiculous. We can't risk contaminating his oxygen supply with an unproven herbal remedy. What if it makes him worse?" "What if it saves his life?" Dr. Harrison countered. "We've been trying conventional treatments for hours, and he's only getting worse. At this point, we need to consider all options." The debate continued for several minutes, with the specialists divided on whether to attempt Janelle's remedy. Meanwhile, Robert's condition continued to deteriorate. His oxygen levels dropped further and his heart rate became increasingly irregular. Dr. Harrison made the decision. "We're going to try it, doctor. Chen, can you set up a way to introduce the steam into his oxygen supply safely?" "Already working on it," Dr. Chen replied, wheeling over a portable humidifier system. "We can filter the steam through his oxygen line without contaminating the main supply." As the doctors prepared the equipment, Janelle began the process of preparing the remedy. She crushed the mint leaves carefully between her palms, just as her grandmother had taught her. The leaves released a sharp, clean scent that was nothing like regular mint. It was stronger, more complex, with undertones that reminded her of her grandmother's garden on summer mornings. She placed the crushed leaves in a small metal bowl and added hot water at exactly the temperature her grandmother had specified. As the mixture steeped, she found herself saying a quiet prayer, asking her grandmother's spirit to guide her hands and help her remember everything correctly. The other specialists watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Dr. Morgan continued to voice her objections, but even she seemed intrigued by the process. Dr. Liu took notes, documenting every step of the preparation for his records. After exactly 7 minutes, Janelle strained the liquid through a clean cloth. The resulting preparation was a pale green color with a steam that carried the intense scent of the healing mint. She handed it to Dr. Chen, who connected it to the humidifier system. "Here we go," Dr. Chen said, activating the system. The steam began to flow through Robert's oxygen supply, and within minutes the scent of the healing mint filled the room. At first, nothing happened. Robert's monitors continued to show the same troubling readings. Dr. Morgan crossed her arms and gave Dr. Harrison a look that clearly said, "I told you so." But then slowly, something began to change. Robert's heart rate, which had been erratic, began to stabilize. His oxygen levels, which had been dropping steadily, held steady and then began to improve slightly. "Are you seeing this, doctor?" Davidson asked, pointing to the cardiac monitor. "His heart rhythm is normalizing." Dr. Liu checked Robert's reflexes again. "His neurological responses are improving too. This is remarkable." Dr. Morgan, despite her skepticism, couldn't argue with the monitors. "I don't understand how this is possible, but his vital signs are definitely improving." Over the next hour, Robert's condition continued to stabilize. His oxygen levels returned to normal ranges, his heart rate became regular, and his overall appearance improved dramatically. The grayish color left his skin, and his breathing became more natural. As the improvement continued, the skeptical specialists began to ask Janelle more questions about her grandmother's knowledge. Dr. Morgan, who had been the most vocal opponent of the herbal remedy, was now taking detailed notes about the preparation process. "This is going to revolutionize how we think about treating exotic plant poisonings," she said to Dr. Harrison. "We need to document everything and study the compounds in this mint variety." Dr. Liu was equally impressed. "The speed of recovery is unprecedented. In cases of severe poisoning, we usually see gradual improvement over days or weeks. This is happening in real time." But Janelle was focused on Robert. Despite the improvement in his vital signs, he was still unconscious and still on the ventilator. The remedy had counteracted the poison, but his body needed time to fully recover from the ordeal. Dr. Harrison decided to gradually reduce the ventilator support to see if Robert could breathe on his own. As they made the adjustments, everyone in the room held their breath. If the remedy had truly worked, Robert should be able to breathe independently. The moment came when they removed the ventilator entirely. For a few tense seconds, Robert's breathing was shallow and irregular. Then slowly his breathing pattern normalized. He was breathing on his own. "Incredible," Dr. Chen said, shaking his head. "Absolutely incredible." But as the medical team celebrated their success, Janelle noticed something that made her uneasy. Through the window of Robert's room, she could see someone in the hallway watching them. It was a man in a dark suit, and when he realized she had seen him, he quickly walked away. Something about the man's presence disturbed her. She thought about the poison plant that had been deliberately placed in Robert's office, and she wondered if whoever had tried to hurt him might still be out there. The medical crisis was over, but Janelle couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't. As the specialists began to pack up their equipment and prepare their reports, Janelle remained by Robert's bedside. She wanted to be there when he woke up, to see for herself that he was truly going to be okay. But more than that, she wanted to understand why someone had tried to poison him, and whether they might try again. The healing had been successful, but the mystery was far from over. 3 days after the dramatic recovery, Robert Sterling was awake, but still weak. The doctors had moved him to a private room where he could rest without the constant monitoring equipment. Janelle had returned to her regular cleaning duties, but she found herself checking on Robert whenever she could. During her evening shift, she knocked softly on his door. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Janelle Williams. I'm the one who found you in your office." Robert's eyes focused on her face and she saw recognition there. "You," he said, his voice still hoarse. "You're the one who saved my life." Janelle shook her head. "The doctors saved your life. I just helped a little. The doctors told me what you did. They said you used knowledge from your grandmother to prepare a remedy that 10 specialists couldn't figure out." Robert struggled to sit up straighter. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "You don't need to thank me, I'm just glad you're okay." Janelle hesitated, then decided to voice her concerns. "Mr. Sterling, do you have any idea who might have put that plant in your office?" Robert's expression darkened. "I've been thinking about that. The plant wasn't there when I arrived that night. Someone must have brought it in after I started working. Do you remember anything unusual about that night? Anyone who might have had access to your office? Robert thought for a moment. My assistant Linda left around 8 p.m. The security guard would have records of anyone who entered the building after that. But, he paused, looking troubled. But what? There are people who have master key cards, board members, senior executives, the building maintenance staff. Any of them could have gotten into my office without leaving a record. Janelle felt a chill. Do you think someone you know tried to poison you? I don't want to believe it, but I can't think of any other explanation. That plant was placed there deliberately, positioned to cause maximum harm. Someone who knew my habits, knew I'd be working alone in that office. Over the next few days, as Robert grew stronger, Janelle found herself drawn into an investigation that she never expected to be part of. Robert had asked her to help him figure out who had tried to poison him, and she couldn't say no to the man whose life she had helped save. They started by examining the security footage from the night of the poisoning. The building's security system was sophisticated, with cameras in every hallway and elevator. But as they reviewed the footage, they discovered something troubling. Look at this, Robert said, pointing to the screen. The camera on my floor stopped recording at 11:47 p.m. It came back online at 12:15 a.m. That's almost 30 minutes, Janelle observed. Someone disabled the camera. Or someone with the technical knowledge to do it without leaving a trace. Robert's face was grim. This wasn't a random attack. Someone planned this very carefully. They expanded their investigation to include Robert's business dealings. He had built his technology company from the ground up, and along the way, he had made both allies and enemies. There were competitors who resented his success, former employees who had left under bad circumstances, and business partners who had disagreed with his decisions. Janelle was amazed by the complexity of Robert's business world. As a cleaning lady, she had always seen the offices after hours, when they were empty and quiet. She had never imagined the intricate web of relationships and conflicts that existed behind the polished corporate facade. There's something else that's been bothering me, Robert said during one of their late-night conversations. The plant that was used to poison me, it's extremely rare. Whoever did this would have needed specialized knowledge to obtain it and cultivate it properly. Janelle nodded. My grandmother's journals mentioned that the poison plant was traditionally used in certain parts of the world, but it was always considered dangerous knowledge. Only certain people were trusted with it. What if the person who did this has access to the same kind of traditional knowledge that your grandmother had? The possibility sent a shiver down Janelle's spine. You mean someone who knows about plants the way my grandmother did? Exactly, someone with knowledge of both modern technology and traditional plant medicine. Someone who could disable security cameras and cultivate exotic poisonous plants. As they continued their investigation, Janelle began to notice patterns that others had missed. Her years of cleaning offices had taught her to observe details that busy executives overlooked. She noticed that certain people had changed their routines after Robert's poisoning. She saw nervousness in faces that had always been confident before. One evening, while cleaning the offices on the 35th floor, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Two executives were talking in hushed tones about Robert's recovery. I can't believe he survived, one of them said. The plan was foolproof. That cleaning lady ruined everything, the other replied. Who would have thought she'd know about traditional remedies? Janelle pressed herself against the wall, trying to hear more without being seen. We need to be more careful now. Robert's going to be suspicious of everyone. Maybe we should consider more direct methods. No, that's too risky. We'll have to wait for another opportunity. Janelle's hands shook as she realized what she had heard. Two people in Robert's own company had been involved in the poisoning attempt, but she hadn't seen their faces, and she couldn't identify their voices clearly enough to be certain who they were. She immediately went to Robert's hospital room to tell him what she had overheard. His face went pale as she recounted the conversation. You're sure it was two executives from my company? Yes, but I don't know which ones. They were talking about you like they expected you to die. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Janelle, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you willing to help me find out who tried to kill me? Janelle thought about the danger involved. These people had already tried to murder Robert once, and they might try again if they felt threatened. But she also thought about her grandmother's teachings about helping people in need. I'll help you, she said, but I think we need to be very careful. These people are dangerous, and they're not going to stop just because their first attempt failed. Robert nodded. I have an idea, but it's risky. I want to pretend that I'm still weak and vulnerable. Meanwhile, you can continue your cleaning duties and keep your ears open. People don't pay attention to cleaning staff. They might say things around you that they wouldn't say around me. That's true, Janelle agreed. But what if they try to hurt you again while you're pretending to be weak? I'll have private security watching me, but they'll be discreet. The important thing is to make whoever did this feel confident enough to reveal themselves. Over the next week, Robert put their plan into action. He returned to work, but made sure to appear frail and easily tired. He canceled important meetings, delegated responsibilities to his executives, and generally acted like someone who was still recovering from a serious illness. Meanwhile, Janelle paid closer attention to the conversations and behaviors of the people who worked in the building. She noticed that two executives in particular seemed more relaxed since Robert's return. They were Dr. Amanda Foster, the head of research and development, and Mr. James Morrison, the chief financial officer. Dr. Foster had always been polite to Janelle, but now she seemed almost friendly, asking about her work and making small talk. Mr. Morrison, who had never acknowledged Janelle's existence before, suddenly started greeting her when he saw her in the hallways. Both changes in behavior struck Janelle as suspicious. People didn't usually become more friendly unless they had a reason. She began to pay special attention to their offices when she cleaned them. In Dr. Foster's office, she found botanical journals hidden behind medical textbooks. The journals contained detailed information about poisonous plants from tropical regions. In Mr. Morrison's office, she discovered a small device that looked like it could be used to disable electronic systems. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While cleaning the conference room late one evening, Janelle found a piece of paper that had been accidentally left behind after a meeting. It was covered with notes in Dr. Foster's handwriting, and among the business notes were disturbing phrases: alternative solutions, natural causes, and inheritance issues. Janelle photographed the paper with her phone and immediately sent the image to Robert. His response came within minutes: meet me in my office, we need to talk. When Janelle arrived at Robert's office, she found him looking more alert and stronger than he had appeared during the day. You were right to be suspicious of Foster and Morrison, he said. I've been doing some investigating of my own. He showed her financial records that revealed both executives had significant debts and had been embezzling money from the company. They needed me out of the way before I discovered what they'd been doing. If I had died, the company would have been in chaos for months, giving them time to cover their tracks. So they tried to kill you for money. Money and power. With me gone, they would have been the most senior executives left. They could have controlled the company's direction and covered up their crimes. Janelle felt sick thinking about how cold and calculating the plot had been. What do we do now? We need more concrete evidence. The paper you found is helpful, but it's not enough to prove attempted murder. We need to catch them in the act of planning another attempt. Robert's plan was ambitious and dangerous. He would announce that he had fully recovered and was planning to conduct a comprehensive audit of all company finances. This would force Foster and Morrison to act quickly if they wanted to eliminate him before he discovered their embezzlement. But that puts you in terrible danger, Janelle protested. I'll have protection, and we'll be ready for whatever they try. The important thing is to get them to reveal their intentions clearly enough that we can have them arrested. The trap was set for the following Friday. Robert announced the audit during the weekly executive meeting, making sure that Foster and Morrison understood the scope of the investigation. Both executives appeared calm during the meeting, but Janelle noticed the tension in their postures and the way they avoided making eye contact with Robert. That evening, as Janelle cleaned the offices, she heard Foster and Morrison talking in the conference room. This time, she was prepared. She activated the recording app on her phone and positioned herself where she could hear clearly. "He's going to find everything," Morrison was saying, his voice tight with panic. "The missing funds, the fake contracts, all of it." "Then we don't have a choice," Foster replied. "It has to look like an accident this time. No more exotic plants or clever poisons." "What do you have in mind?" "The parking garage, late Friday night when he's leaving. A simple mugging gone wrong. It happens all the time in the city." Janelle's blood turned to ice. They were planning to murder Robert in just 2 days, and they were going to make it look like a random crime. She continued recording as they discussed the details of their plan. "I have contacts who can handle this kind of thing," Morrison said. "It will cost us, but it's better than going to prison for embezzlement." "And murder," Foster added grimly. "We're already in too deep to back out now." After they left, Janelle remained hidden in the conference room for several minutes, making sure they were really gone. Then she called Robert immediately. "They're planning to kill you Friday night in the parking garage," she said without preamble. "They're going to hire someone to make it look like a mugging." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Did you record the conversation?" "Yes, every word." "Good, now we have them. But we need to be very careful about how we handle this. If they suspect we know about their plan, they might change it or try something even more dangerous." They decided to contact the police and FBI immediately. The recording of Foster and Morrison's conversation was enough evidence to warrant their arrest, but Robert wanted to make sure they were caught in the act of carrying out their plan, so there would be no possibility of them escaping justice. Working with law enforcement, they developed a plan that would allow the authorities to catch Foster and Morrison in the process of attempting murder. Robert would appear to follow his normal Friday routine, but he would be surrounded by undercover agents. When the hired killers appeared, they would be arrested along with the executives who had hired them. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only way to ensure that Foster and Morrison faced the full consequences of their actions. As Friday approached, Janelle found herself more nervous than she had ever been in her life. She had gone from being a simple cleaning lady to being a key witness in an attempted murder case. But she also felt a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. Her grandmother's knowledge had saved Robert's life, and now her courage and observation skills were going to help bring his would-be killers to justice. The final confrontation was only 2 days away. As Friday approached, Janelle found herself thinking more and more about her grandmother. The elderly woman who had raised her in rural Alabama had been dead for 5 years, but her presence felt stronger than ever. It was as if her grandmother's spirit was guiding her through this dangerous situation. On Thursday evening, while Robert met with the FBI agents to finalize their plan, Janelle sat in her small apartment reading through her grandmother's journals. She was looking for any additional information about plant poisons and their antidotes, just in case Foster and Morrison had another botanical surprise planned. As she turned the pages of the oldest journal, she found something that made her heart skip a beat. It was a drawing of the same rare poison plant that had been used against Robert, but next to it was a note in her grandmother's careful handwriting. Brought north by the Foster family in 1952. Dangerous knowledge passed down through their women. Janelle stared at the page in shock. Foster. Dr. Amanda Foster, the head of research and development at Robert's company, came from a family that had knowledge of exotic poison plants. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a family tradition of dangerous botanical knowledge. She immediately called Robert. "I found something in my grandmother's journals, Doctor. Foster's family has been working with poison plants for generations." Robert was quiet for a moment. That explains how she knew about the specific plant and how to cultivate it. "But Janelle, if her family has been doing this for generations, she might know things that even your grandmother didn't write down." "What do you mean?" "I mean she might have backup plans that we haven't thought of. Plants that don't show up in any medical journals, poisons that don't have known antidotes." The realization sent a chill through Janelle. She had assumed that her grandmother's knowledge was comprehensive, but every family's plant wisdom was different. Dr. Foster might have access to botanical weapons that Janelle couldn't counteract. "We need to warn the FBI," she said. "Already on it, but Janelle, I want you to stay away from the office tomorrow. If Foster suspects that you know about her family's background, you could be in serious danger." But Janelle couldn't stay away. Something in her grandmother's journals had caught her attention, and she needed to investigate further. According to her grandmother's notes, the Foster family's plant knowledge was incomplete. They knew about poisons, but they had never learned about the healing plants that could counteract them. That's why the healing mint works so well, Janelle realized. Dr. Foster knew how to poison you, but she didn't know about the antidote. She probably thought you were going to die no matter what the doctors tried. This gave them an unexpected advantage. If Dr. Foster tried to use another plant poison as a backup plan, Janelle might be able to counteract it using her grandmother's knowledge, but only if she was there to recognize what was happening. Against Robert's wishes, Janelle decided to go to work on Friday as usual. She would stay alert for any signs of plant-based attacks while the FBI handled the planned confrontation in the parking garage. Friday morning arrived gray and rainy, which seemed fitting for what everyone expected to be a dramatic day. Robert arrived at the office early, surrounded by undercover agents who posed as new employees and temporary workers. Janelle began her cleaning duties as usual, but she carried a small bag of emergency remedies that she had prepared from her grandmother's recipes. Dr. Foster and Mr. Morrison both seemed nervous, but they were trying to act normal. Foster spent most of the morning in her office with the door closed, while Morrison made several phone calls that he clearly didn't want anyone to overhear. Around noon, Janelle noticed something that made her stomach clench with fear. While cleaning near Dr. Foster's office, she caught a whiff of a familiar sweet smell. It was the same scent she had noticed in Robert's office the night he was poisoned, but this time it was stronger and more concentrated. She immediately called Robert. "There's another poison plant somewhere in the building. I can smell it." "Where?" "I think it's coming from Dr. Foster's office, but I'm not sure. The smell is much stronger than before." Robert's voice was tense. "She's planning something for today, before tonight's confrontation. Can you identify what kind of plant it is?" Janelle moved closer to Foster's office, trying to pinpoint the source of the smell. "It's different from the first plant. This one smells sweeter, almost like flowers, but there's something wrong with it. Something that makes my throat feel tight." "Get out of there now," Robert ordered. "Whatever she's planning, it's already started." But as Janelle turned to leave, Dr. Foster's office door opened. The woman stepped out wearing gloves and carrying a small spray bottle. When she saw Janelle, her expression changed from concentration to alarm. "What are you doing here?" Foster demanded. "Just cleaning, ma'am," Janelle replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Foster studied her face carefully. "You're the one who saved Robert Sterling's life, aren't you? The cleaning lady with the folk remedies." Janelle felt danger radiating from the woman. "I just helped a little. The doctors did most of the work." "I don't think so." Foster's voice was cold. "I think you know a lot more than you're letting on. In fact, I think you know things that could be very dangerous to certain people." Foster raised the spray bottle, and Janelle realized with horror that it contained some kind of poison that could be dispersed through the air. This was the backup plan if the parking garage murder failed. Foster was prepared to kill both Robert and anyone else who knew too much about her botanical crimes. "Dr. Foster, please," Janelle said, backing away slowly. "I don't know anything that could hurt you." "But you do," Foster replied, following her down the hallway. "You have your grandmother's journals. You know about plant families and their histories. You probably already figured out that my family has been working with these plants for generations." Janelle's hand moved to the small bag of remedies she carried. Somewhere in that bag was something that could counteract whatever poison Foster was planning to use, but she needed to know what specific plant she was dealing with. "What kind of plant are you using?" she asked, continuing to back away. Foster smiled coldly. "One that your grandmother never encountered, one that doesn't have an antidote in any journal or medical textbook. It's a family secret that's been passed down for generations." But as Foster raised the spray bottle to use it, Janelle caught another whiff of the sweet smell. This time, recognition hit her like a lightning bolt. She had encountered this scent before, not in person, but in her grandmother's stories about plants that were so dangerous they were forbidden. Madagascar death flower, she whispered. Foster's eyes widened in surprise. How could you possibly know that name? My grandmother told me stories about plants that were too dangerous to use, plants that could kill with just their fragrance. Janelle's hand closed around a small vial in her bag. But she also told me about the one plant that could protect against them. Foster's confident expression faltered. That's impossible. There is no antidote to Madagascar death flower. Not an antidote, Janelle said, pulling out the vial. A shield. She threw the contents of the vial into the air between herself and Foster. The liquid dispersed into a fine mist that smelled like pine forests and mountain air. As the mist settled, Foster tried to spray her poison, but something had changed. The sweet, dangerous smell of the Madagascar death flower was neutralized, replaced by the clean, protective scent of Janelle's grandmother's shield remedy. Foster stared in shock as her poison became harmless. How is this possible? My grandmother learned from people who had to protect themselves from plant poisons, Janelle explained. She knew that for every dangerous plant, nature provided a protective one. You just had to know where to look. But their confrontation was interrupted by the sound of commotion from the floor below. Shouting, running footsteps, and what sounded like a struggle. The FBI's operation in the parking garage had apparently moved inside the building. Foster realized that her entire plan was falling apart. The parking garage murder had failed, her backup poison attack had been neutralized, and law enforcement was already in the building. In desperation, she lunged at Janelle with the spray bottle, hoping to use it as a weapon even if the poison was no longer effective. But Janelle had learned more than just plant remedies from her grandmother. She had also learned how to defend herself. As Foster attacked, Janelle stepped aside and used the woman's momentum to send her crashing into the wall. The spray bottle flew from Foster's hands and shattered on the floor. Within minutes, FBI agents arrived on the scene. They found Dr. Foster unconscious from her collision with the wall and Janelle standing calmly beside her, still holding the empty vial that had saved both their lives. "Are you okay?" one of the agents asked Janelle. "I'm fine," she replied. "But you need to be careful with that broken glass. It contained Madagascar death flower extract. Even in small amounts, it could be dangerous." As the agents carefully secured the area and arrested Dr. Foster, Janelle felt a profound sense of completion. Her grandmother's knowledge had not only saved Robert's life, but had also protected her from a deadly attack. The connection between past and present, between traditional wisdom and modern challenges, had proven stronger than the forces of greed and violence. But the day wasn't over yet. Somewhere in the building, Robert was still in danger and Mr. Morrison was still free. The final confrontation was yet to come, as the FBI agents secured Dr. Foster and the area around the broken poison bottle. Janelle found herself thinking about the stories her grandmother used to tell on quiet summer evenings in Alabama. Sarah Williams had been born in 1920, the daughter of a woman who had learned plant medicine from her own grandmother, creating an unbroken chain of knowledge that stretched back generations. "Child," her grandmother had said many times, "plants are like people. Some are gentle and healing, some are dangerous and harmful, but most are both, depending on how you treat them. The secret is knowing which is which, and when to use what you know." Janelle had been only 8 years old when her grandmother first started teaching her about plants. She remembered walking through the woods behind their small house, learning to identify healing herbs by their leaves, their smell, and the way they grew. Her grandmother had made it into a game, but even as a child, Janelle had understood that this knowledge was precious and potentially life-saving. "Why don't the doctors know about these plants, Grandmama?" young Janelle had asked one day as they gathered mint leaves for tea. "Doctors know about pills and machines," her grandmother had replied. "That's good knowledge and it saves a lot of lives, but they've forgotten that plants were medicine long before there were pills. Sometimes the old ways and the new ways need to work together." Now, 25 years later, Janelle understood the depth of her grandmother's wisdom. The old ways and the new ways had indeed worked together to save Robert Sterling's life. Modern medicine had kept him alive, while the traditional plant remedy had counteracted the exotic poison. But her grandmother had taught her about more than just healing plants. She had also warned her about the dangerous ones, the plants that could harm rather than heal. These lessons had seemed like scary stories to young Janelle, but now she realized they had been essential preparation for this moment. There are families, her grandmother had said, who learned about the harmful plants instead of the healing ones. They passed down knowledge of poisons instead of cures. It's sad, really, because the same plant that can kill can often heal if you know how to prepare it right. Janelle remembered asking why anyone would choose to learn about harmful plants instead of helpful ones. Sometimes people get hurt, and instead of healing from it, they decide to hurt others, her grandmother had explained. They think that sharing pain will make their own pain less, but it never works that way. Pain shared is just more pain in the world. As Janelle helped the FBI agents document the scene, she thought about Dr. Foster and the choices that had led her to this moment. Foster came from a family with botanical knowledge, just like Janelle did. But somewhere along the line, Foster's family had chosen the path of harm instead of healing. Agent Martinez, the lead investigator, approached Janelle as the scene was being cleared. "Ms. Williams, we're going to need a detailed statement from you about what happened here. But first, can you tell us about this shield remedy you used? We need to understand what you did to neutralize the poison." Janelle explained the remedy as best she could. Her grandmother had called it nature's armor, a combination of specific plant oils that could neutralize airborne toxins. It worked by creating a protective barrier in the air that prevented poisonous particles from reaching their target. "My grandmother said it was developed by people who lived in places where dangerous plants grew wild," Janelle explained. "They needed protection when they walked through areas where the wrong wind could carry deadly pollen or oils." "And you just happen to have this remedy with you today?" Agent Martinez asked. "I prepared it last night after reading my grandmother's journals. I had a feeling that Dr. Foster might try something with plants again, and I wanted to be ready." Agent Martinez shook his head in amazement. "Your grandmother's knowledge may have prevented multiple deaths today. Dr. Foster's poison was concentrated enough to kill anyone in this hallway." As they continued to process the scene, Robert Sterling arrived with another group of FBI agents. He looked shaken but unharmed, and Janelle felt a wave of relief wash over her. "The parking garage operation was successful," he told her. "Morrison and the men he hired were arrested without anyone getting hurt. But when we heard about what happened up here," he trailed off, looking at the broken glass and chemical residue on the floor. "I'm okay," Janelle assured him. "My grandmother's shield remedy worked perfectly." Robert studied her face. "Janelle, do you realize what you've done? You've not only saved my life twice now, but you've also exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed my entire company. And you did it using knowledge that most people would dismiss as old wives' tales." "My grandmother always said that wisdom doesn't get old, it just gets forgotten," Janelle replied. "Maybe it's time for some of that wisdom to be remembered." Over the next few hours, as the investigation continued, Janelle found herself at the center of attention in a way that made her uncomfortable. FBI agents, police detectives, and medical experts all wanted to hear about her grandmother's plant knowledge. They were particularly interested in the shield remedy and its potential applications for law enforcement and military use. But what touched Janelle most deeply was a conversation she had with Dr. Harrison, who had been called in to consult on the medical aspects of the case. "Ms. Williams," he said, "I want you to know that what happened here has changed how I think about medicine. Your grandmother's knowledge saved a life that all of our modern techniques couldn't save. I think it's time for the medical community to start paying more attention to traditional remedies. My grandmother always said that the best medicine combines the old and the new," Janelle replied. "She would be happy to know that her knowledge helped someone." "I have a proposition for you," Dr. Harrison continued. "The hospital is starting a new research program to study traditional plant medicines. We need someone who understands these remedies not just as recipes, but as part of a living tradition. Would you be interested in working with us? Janelle was surprised by the offer, but I'm not a doctor or a scientist. I'm just a cleaning lady who learned some things from her grandmother. Sometimes the most important knowledge comes from the most unexpected places, Dr. Harrison said. What do you think your grandmother would say about this opportunity? Janelle thought about her grandmother's dreams for her. Sarah Williams had always encouraged her granddaughter to use her knowledge to help people, but she had also understood the realities of their circumstances. Being a poor black woman in rural Alabama had limited her opportunities, but it hadn't limited her wisdom. She would say that knowledge is only valuable if it's shared with people who need it, Janelle said finally. As the evening wore on and the investigation wrapped up, Janelle found herself alone with Robert Sterling in his office. The space looked different now, knowing what had happened there and who had been responsible for it. I have something to ask you, Robert said, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Janelle waited, curious about what he might say. This whole experience has made me realize that I've been running my company wrong. I've been so focused on technology and profits that I've forgotten about the people who make everything possible. People like you, who notice things others miss and have knowledge that can't be learned in business school. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I want to offer you a position in my company, not as a cleaning lady, but as a consultant. Someone who can help us remember that the most important innovations often come from combining old wisdom with new ideas. Janelle felt her heart racing. Mr. Sterling, I don't know anything about running a technology company. But you know about solving problems that seem impossible to solve. You know about observing details that others miss. And most importantly, you know about caring for people and never giving up on them. Robert's expression was serious. Those are exactly the qualities this company needs. As Janelle considered his offer, she thought about her grandmother's final words to her. Sarah Williams had been dying in a hospital bed, but her mind had been clear and her voice had been strong. Janelle, child, she had said, I'm giving you more than just recipes and remedies. I'm giving you the responsibility to use this knowledge wisely. Don't hide it away because you think it's not important enough. Don't let people tell you that old knowledge isn't valuable. Promise me you'll find ways to help people with what I've taught you. Janelle had made that promise, but she had never imagined it would lead to an opportunity like this. Now she had the chance to honor her grandmother's memory by bringing traditional wisdom into the modern world in a way that could help countless people. I'll take the job, she said finally, but I have one condition. Robert raised an eyebrow. What's that? I want to set up a program to document and preserve traditional knowledge from families like mine. There are people all over the world who have wisdom that could save lives, but it's being lost because no one thinks it's important enough to record. Robert smiled. I think that's exactly the kind of program my company should be supporting. When can you start? As they shook hands on their agreement, Janelle felt her grandmother's presence in the room. Sarah Williams had passed down her knowledge to help people, and now that knowledge was going to reach far beyond anything she could have imagined. The healing had come full circle, from grandmother to granddaughter, from traditional wisdom to modern application, from one saved life to the potential for saving many more. 3 weeks after the dramatic confrontation with Dr. Foster and Mr. Morrison, Janelle Williams found herself in a place she had never imagined, sitting in a boardroom at Sterling Technologies, presenting her ideas to a group of executives and scientists. The transformation from night shift cleaning lady to consultant had been swift, but Robert Sterling had been determined to move quickly. The problem with modern medicine, Janelle was saying to the assembled group, isn't that it's wrong. It's that it's incomplete. My grandmother always said that healing is like building a house. You need both a strong foundation and modern tools to make it work. Dr. Harrison, who had become one of her strongest supporters, nodded encouragingly. Can you give us a specific example of how traditional knowledge could complement modern medical practice? Janelle clicked to the next slide in her presentation, which showed before and after photos of Robert Sterling. 3 weeks ago, 10 of the country's best doctors couldn't figure out how to counteract an exotic plant poison. But a remedy that my grandmother learned from her grandmother worked within an hour. The difference wasn't that traditional medicine was better than modern medicine. It was that they worked together. The room was quiet as the executives absorbed this. Some looked skeptical, others curious. Robert, who was sitting at the head of the table, looked proud. What we're proposing, Janelle continued, is a systematic way to document, study, and integrate traditional plant knowledge with modern medical research. Not to replace current treatments, but to expand the tools available to doctors and patients. Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of the company's new medical research division, and no relation to Janelle despite the shared surname, raised her hand. Ms. Williams, how do we ensure the safety and efficacy of these traditional remedies? Modern medicine requires rigorous testing and FDA approval. You're absolutely right, Janelle replied. That's why we need to work with scientists and doctors to study these remedies properly. My grandmother's knowledge saved Mr. Sterling's life, but we need to understand exactly how and why it worked so we can use it safely for other people. She clicked to another slide showing the organizational structure she had proposed. We would start by collecting traditional knowledge from families and communities around the world. Then we would work with botanists to identify and cultivate the plants involved. Finally, we would partner with medical researchers to study the active compounds and develop safe, standardized treatments. The presentation continued for another hour, with Janelle fielding questions about everything from intellectual property rights to international regulations. She was amazed at how much she had learned in just 3 weeks of working with Robert's team, but the real test came afterward when she was alone with Robert in his office. "How do you think it went?" he asked. "Honestly, I think some of them still see me as just a cleaning lady who got lucky," Janelle replied. "They're being polite because you're the boss, but they don't really believe that traditional knowledge can be valuable." Robert considered this. "You might be right about some of them, but Dr. Harrison believes in what you're doing, and so do I. Sometimes that's enough to get started." Over the next few months, Janelle threw herself into the work of building the Traditional Knowledge Research Program. She traveled to communities across the American South, interviewing elderly people who still remembered plant remedies passed down through their families. She worked with botanists to identify and catalog medicinal plants. She collaborated with chemists to analyze the active compounds in traditional remedies. The work was challenging in ways she had never expected. Many of the people she interviewed were initially suspicious of her motives. They had seen too many instances of traditional knowledge being exploited by outsiders who profited from it, without giving anything back to the communities that had preserved it. "Why should we trust you?" asked Mama Louise, an elderly woman in rural Mississippi who was known throughout her community for her healing abilities. "You come here with your fancy company and your recording equipment, asking us to share secrets that our grandmothers died protecting." Janelle understood the woman's skepticism. "Because I'm not asking you to give me your knowledge. I'm asking you to help me preserve it and share it in a way that honors your family's wisdom. Any remedies that come out of this research will benefit the communities that shared the knowledge." It took time to build trust, but gradually people began to open up. Janelle found herself documenting an incredible wealth of knowledge. Remedies for everything from common colds to serious illnesses, plant-based treatments that had been proven effective over generations of use. One of the most significant discoveries came from an elderly Cherokee woman named Mary Crow Feather, who lived on a reservation in North Carolina. Mary's family had preserved knowledge of plants that could counteract specific types of poisoning, including some that were unknown to modern toxicology. "My great-great-grandmother learned these remedies during the Trail of Tears," Mary explained as she showed Janelle her carefully tended medicinal garden. People were being poisoned by contaminated water and unfamiliar plants. She had to figure out how to keep her family alive, using whatever plants she could find along the way. The story gave Janelle chills. Here was knowledge that had been developed under the most desperate circumstances, passed down through generations, and was now being preserved just in time. Mary was in her 80s, and none of her children had shown interest in learning the plant remedies. They think the old ways are backwards, Mary said sadly. They want to be modern to fit into the white world. They don't understand that wisdom doesn't have a color or a time period. Working with Mary and other traditional healers, Janelle began to see patterns in the knowledge she was collecting. Many cultures had developed similar remedies for similar problems, even when they had no contact with each other. This suggested that the traditional knowledge wasn't just folk belief, it was based on real, observable properties of plants that worked consistently across different populations. The breakthrough that would make Janelle's program famous came 6 months after she started working for Sterling Technologies. A child in the nearby city had been poisoned by an unknown substance, and the hospital's toxicology team couldn't identify what was causing her symptoms. Dr. Harrison called Janelle at home. "We need your help. We have a 7-year-old girl who's been poisoned, but we can't figure out with what. Her symptoms don't match anything in our databases." Janelle arrived at the hospital within an hour. The child, a little girl named Emma, was unconscious and struggling to breathe. Her parents were terrified, and the medical team was running out of options. "Can you describe her symptoms?" Janelle asked Dr. Harrison. "Respiratory distress, elevated heart rate, and a distinctive sweet smell on her breath. We've tested for every known poison, but nothing matches." Janelle felt a chill of recognition. "The sweet smell, can you describe it more specifically?" Dr. Harrison led her to Emma's room. As soon as Janelle stepped inside, she knew what had happened. The sweet smell was exactly like the Madagascar death flower that Dr. Foster had tried to use against her. "She's been poisoned with an exotic plant extract," Janelle said. "I know because someone tried to use the same poison against me." Working quickly, Janelle prepared the same shield remedy that had saved her life. But adapting it for a child required modifications based on knowledge she had gathered from Mary Crow Feather about treating poisoned children. The remedy worked even faster than it had before. Within 30 minutes, Emma's breathing improved. Within an hour, she was conscious and asking for her parents. The medical team was amazed by the rapid recovery. "How did you know what to do?" Emma's mother asked Janelle tearfully. "My grandmother taught me that every poison has a cure if you know where to look," Janelle replied. "Sometimes the cure is in a laboratory and sometimes it's in a garden. The important thing is being willing to look everywhere." The case made national news. "Traditional knowledge saves child's life when modern medicine fails," was the headline in several major newspapers. Suddenly, Janelle's program was receiving attention from medical schools, pharmaceutical companies, and government agencies around the world. But for Janelle, the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Emma's grandmother, who had been present during the child's recovery, approached her as she was leaving the hospital. "You have the gift," the elderly woman said simply. "Your grandmother would be proud." As Janelle drove home that night, she thought about how far she had come from that terrifying night, when she had first heard Robert Sterling gasping for breath across the street from her apartment. Her grandmother's simple remedies had grown into something much larger, a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science that could help people around the world. But the real miracle, she realized, wasn't in the complex research program or the media attention. It was in the simple truth her grandmother had taught her, that caring for people and never giving up on them was the most powerful medicine of all. The foundation had been laid. Now it was time to build something extraordinary on top of it. Despite the success with young Emma's case, Janelle's program faced unexpected challenges as it grew larger. The medical establishment, while impressed by the results, remained skeptical about integrating traditional remedies into mainstream practice. Insurance companies questioned the cost-effectiveness of treatments that couldn't be easily standardized. Some traditional healers worried that their knowledge was being commercialized without proper respect for its sacred nature. The crisis came 8 months into the program, when a prominent medical journal published an editorial questioning the scientific validity of Janelle's work. Dr. Richard Blackstone, a respected toxicologist from Harvard Medical School, argued that anecdotal successes didn't constitute proof of efficacy. While Ms. Williams' interventions may have coincided with patient recoveries, he wrote, We cannot assume causation without proper controlled studies. The medical community has moved beyond folk remedies for good reasons. They are unpredictable, unstandardized, and potentially dangerous. The editorial sparked a heated debate in medical circles. Some doctors defended Janelle's work, pointing to the undeniable results in Robert Sterling's case and little Emma's recovery. Others agreed with Dr. Blackstone that traditional remedies needed to be subjected to the same rigorous testing as pharmaceutical drugs. The controversy reached Robert Sterling's office when several major investors in his company expressed concerns about the traditional knowledge research program. They worried that associating the company with unproven medical treatments could damage its reputation and hurt its stock price. "I'm getting pressure from the board," Robert told Janelle during an emergency meeting. "They want me to scale back the program until we have more scientific data to support it." Janelle felt her heart sink, but we're helping people. Isn't that what matters? In an ideal world, yes. But in the real world, we need credibility and funding to continue helping people. Maybe we should consider Dr. Blackstone's suggestions about controlled studies. "That could take years," Janelle protested. "How many people might we fail to help while we're conducting studies?" It was Dr. Harrison who proposed a solution. "What if we approach this differently? Instead of trying to prove that traditional remedies work, what if we focus on understanding why they work? We could partner with research universities to study the chemical compounds in these plants and document their mechanisms of action." The idea appealed to both sides of the debate. Scientists would get the rigorous research they demanded, while traditional healers would see their knowledge being studied with respect and precision. But it would require Janelle to work even more closely with people who doubted her abilities. The first major collaboration was with Dr. Blackstone himself. Despite his public criticism of her work, he agreed to participate in a joint study of the healing mint that had saved Robert Sterling's life. Janelle was nervous about working with someone who had publicly questioned her credibility, but she was determined to prove the value of her grandmother's knowledge. The initial meeting between Janelle and Dr. Blackstone was tense. He was a tall, imposing man with gray hair and a serious demeanor that made Janelle feel like she was being examined under a microscope. "Ms. Williams," he said formally, "I want to be clear about my position. I'm not here because I believe in folk medicine. I'm here because there are unexplained results that deserve scientific investigation." "I understand, Dr. Blackstone. I'm not asking you to believe in anything. I'm just asking you to look at the evidence with an open mind." "Fair enough. Now, can you walk me through exactly how you prepared the remedy that allegedly cured Mr. Sterling?" Janelle demonstrated the process step by step, explaining each detail as her grandmother had taught her. Dr. Blackstone took extensive notes, asking technical questions about temperatures, timing, and chemical properties that Janelle couldn't answer scientifically. "Your grandmother's instructions are remarkably precise," he admitted. "The temperature range you specified, the steeping time, the specific variety of mint, these details suggest a sophisticated understanding of the plant's chemistry." Over the following weeks, Dr. Blackstone's team analyzed every aspect of the healing mint remedy. They identified several chemical compounds that had never been documented in scientific literature, including one that appeared to neutralize specific types of plant toxins. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Blackstone told Janelle during one of their progress meetings. "The compound we've isolated, let's call it Compound J for now, appears to work as a universal antidote for a whole class of plant poisons. Your grandmother somehow knew about a mechanism of action that we're only beginning to understand." But the real test came when another poisoning case arrived at the hospital. A construction worker had been exposed to an unknown botanical toxin at a job site near a botanical garden. His symptoms were severe, and the standard treatments weren't helping. Dr. Harrison called both Janelle and Dr. Blackstone to consult on the case. "We need to decide whether to try the traditional remedy or wait for more conventional treatments to take effect." Dr. Blackstone studied the patient's charts carefully. "The toxin profile matches what we've seen before. Compound J should be effective against this type of poisoning. But we haven't finished testing the purified compound. one of his research assistants pointed out. We don't know the proper dosage or potential side effects. Janelle looked at the patient through the window. He was a young man, probably not much older than she was, and his condition was deteriorating rapidly. My grandmother's remedy has worked before, she said quietly, and we know it's safe when prepared correctly. Dr. Blackstone was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the decision. Finally, he turned to Janelle. Can you prepare the remedy exactly as you did before?
Yes.
Then let's do it, but I want every step documented, every measurement recorded. If this works, we need to understand exactly why. The remedy worked even faster than before. Within 45 minutes, the construction worker's breathing improved dramatically. Within 2 hours, he was conscious and talking. Dr. Blackstone watched the entire process with amazement. Ms. Williams, he said as they monitored the patient's recovery, I owe you an apology. When I wrote that editorial, I was thinking like a scientist who values controlled conditions over real-world results. But watching you work, seeing how precisely you follow your grandmother's instructions, I realized that traditional knowledge can be just as rigorous as laboratory science. It's different, Janelle replied, but that doesn't make it less valuable. The successful treatment of the construction worker marked a turning point in the perception of Janelle's program. Dr. Blackstone's conversion from critic to supporter carried significant weight in the medical community. Other researchers began reaching out to collaborate on studies of traditional plant knowledge. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. Mary Crow Feather, the elderly Cherokee healer who had shared her family's poison antidotes with Janelle, called her with important news. My grandson wants to learn the plant medicine now, Mary said, her voice filled with joy. He saw the news about your work on television. He said he's proud to come from a family with healing knowledge. That's wonderful, Mary. Your family's wisdom deserves to be preserved. It's more than preserved now, child. It's respected. You've helped people understand that the old ways aren't backwards, they're just different. And sometimes different is exactly what the world needs. As Janelle hung up the phone, she thought about how much had changed since that terrifying night when she first heard Robert Sterling struggling for breath. Her grandmother's simple remedies had grown into a program that was transforming how the medical world thought about traditional knowledge. But more importantly, she had learned to trust herself and her abilities. The doubt and skepticism of others had made her stronger, not weaker. She had proven that wisdom could come from unexpected places, and that healing was about more than just medicine, it was about connecting with people and never giving up on them. The program was no longer just about preserving traditional knowledge. It had become a bridge between different ways of understanding the world, showing that the old and the new could work together to create something better than either could achieve alone. The foundation was solid now. It was time to build something that would last for generations. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night in November. Janelle had been asleep in her new apartment near Sterling Technologies when her phone rang with an urgency that made her heart race before she was even fully awake. Janelle, we need you at Children's Hospital immediately. It was Dr. Harrison, and his voice carried a tension she had never heard before. We have a situation that's unlike anything we've encountered. 20 minutes later, Janelle arrived at the hospital to find chaos. The emergency department was filled with children, 17 in total, all showing symptoms of severe poisoning. They ranged in age from 4 to 14, and they had all been at the same birthday party earlier that evening. What happened? Janelle asked Dr. Harrison as she took in the scene. Birthday party at Riverside Park. The children were playing near some decorative plants when they all became ill simultaneously. We've identified the plant. It's a rare species called Dendrobium noxium that was recently planted as part of a botanical beautification project. Janelle felt a chill run down her spine. She had never heard of Dendrobium noxium, but the symptoms she was seeing in the children looked eerily familiar. Difficulty breathing, elevated heart rates, and that same sweet smell she had encountered with the Madagascar death flower. Have you tried the standard treatments? Everything: activated charcoal, IV fluids, oxygen support, even some experimental antidotes. Nothing is working. The children are getting worse, and we're running out of options. Dr. Harrison led her to the room where the most critically ill children were being treated. 3 of them were on ventilators, and their parents stood by helplessly, tears streaming down their faces. The sight broke Janelle's heart. "Dr. Harrison," she said quietly, "I need to see the plant that poisoned them, and I need access to my grandmother's journals. If this is related to the other exotic plants we've encountered, there might be information in her notes." While Dr. Harrison arranged for someone to bring samples of the Dendrobium noxium to the hospital, Janelle called Robert Sterling. Despite the early hour, he answered immediately. "Janelle. What's wrong?" 17 children have been poisoned by an exotic plant. I need my grandmother's journals, all of them. Can you have someone bring them to Children's Hospital?" "Already on my way," Robert replied without hesitation. By 4 a.m., Janelle was surrounded by botanical samples, medical charts, and stacks of her grandmother's journals. The hospital had set up a conference room for her to work in, and she was joined by Dr. Harrison, Dr. Blackstone, who had driven up from Boston, and several other specialists. As Janelle studied the plant samples under a magnifying glass, she felt a growing sense of recognition. The leaves had a distinctive waxy coating, and the flowers, though different in color from the Madagascar death flower, had a similar structure. "This is from the same family as the plant that Dr. Foster used against Mr. Sterling," she announced. "They're related species, which means they probably produce similar toxins." "But you neutralized the Madagascar death flower with your shield remedy," Dr. Blackstone pointed out. "Would the same treatment work for this species?" Janelle shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. The children's symptoms are different, more severe, and the plant samples show a much higher concentration of toxic compounds." She turned to her grandmother's journals, searching for any reference to plants in the Dendrobium family. The work was painstaking, made more difficult by the urgency of the situation. Every minute that passed was another minute that the children's conditions could worsen. Finally, in one of the oldest journals, she found what she was looking for. A detailed drawing of a plant that looked remarkably similar to Dendrobium noxium, with notes in her grandmother's careful handwriting about its effects and treatment. "Found it," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "But there's a problem. The antidote requires a plant that my grandmother called sky root. I've never seen it before, and I don't know if it grows anywhere near here." Dr. Harrison leaned over her shoulder to look at the journal entry. "Can you describe this sky root plant?" Janelle read from her grandmother's notes. "Small blue flowers grows in high altitudes, roots that spread horizontally rather than vertically. She says it only blooms during certain moon phases, and that the roots have to be harvested at exactly the right time to be effective." The description was so specific and unusual that everyone in the room felt a moment of despair. How could they possibly find such a specialized plant in the middle of the night, especially when children's lives were hanging in the balance? But Dr. Blackstone had an idea. The botanical garden where the Dendrobium noxium was planted, they have an extensive collection of rare plants from around the world. If sky root exists anywhere in this region, it would be there. Dr. Harrison immediately called the garden's emergency contact. Within an hour, the garden's head botanist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, arrived at the hospital with surprising news. "You're in luck," she said, pulling out her phone to show them photos. "We have a small grove of what you're describing in our high-altitude greenhouse. It's a plant we acquired from a collector in Tibet. We've been studying it for its unique root structure." "Can we harvest some of the roots now?" Janelle asked urgently. "Already done," Dr. Vasquez replied, holding up a carefully sealed container. "I brought everything you might need: roots, flowers, even some soil samples." But as Janelle examined the sky root samples, she realized there was another problem. Her grandmother's notes indicated that the plant had to be prepared in a very specific way, and the instructions were written in a dialect that Janelle only partially understood. "I can't read all of this," she admitted, feeling panic start to set in. "Some of these words, I think they're in an old language that my grandmother learned from her grandmother." Dr. Vasquez studied the journal entries. Some of these terms look similar to traditional Tibetan botanical language. The collector who sold us the plant mentioned that it was used in traditional medicine there. Do you know anyone who could translate this?
Actually, yes, doctor.
Tenzin Norbu at the university. He's a Tibetan scholar who specializes in traditional plant medicine, but it's 5 a.m. Call him, Dr. Harrison said without hesitation. Tell him children's lives are at stake. While they waited for Dr. Norbu to arrive, Janelle began preparing what she could understand from her grandmother's notes. The sky root had to be processed in multiple stages, with precise timing between each step. She worked carefully, following the familiar rhythm of traditional plant preparation that her grandmother had taught her. Dr. Norbu arrived within the hour, a small, elderly man with kind eyes and steady hands. He studied Janelle's grandmother's journal entries with great interest. "Your grandmother was remarkably knowledgeable," he said in accented but perfect English. "These instructions are very similar to traditional Tibetan methods for preparing high-altitude medicinal plants." Working together, Janelle and Dr. Norbu translated the complete preparation instructions. The process was complex, requiring the sky root to be prepared in 3 different ways and then combined in a specific sequence. Each preparation had to be completed during a precise time window, or the remedy would lose its effectiveness. As Janelle worked, she felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. Sarah Williams had never seen Tibetan sky root, had never treated Dendrobium noxium poisoning, but her knowledge had been deep enough to understand the principles that would guide the treatment. "Your grandmother understood something that many modern practitioners have forgotten," Dr. Norbu said as they worked. "She knew that plants from the same family often require similar treatments, even if they come from different parts of the world." The preparation took 6 hours to complete. During that time, the children's conditions had stabilized somewhat, but they were still in critical danger. The medical team had done everything they could to support the children's vital functions, but without an antidote to the plant toxin, time was running out. Finally, at 11 a.m., Janelle had prepared enough of the remedy to treat all 17 children. The treatment would be administered as a fine mist that the children would inhale, similar to the method that had worked for Robert Sterling. "Are you ready?" Dr. Harrison asked as they prepared to begin treatment. Janelle took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They started with the 3 most critical children, the ones on ventilators. As the mist from Janelle's remedy filled their oxygen supply, everyone in the room watched the monitors anxiously. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The children's vital signs remained unchanged, and Janelle felt a moment of crushing doubt. What if she had misinterpreted her grandmother's notes? What if the sky root preparation was wrong? But then, slowly, miraculously, the changes began. The first child's oxygen levels started to improve. Her heart rate, which had been dangerously elevated, began to slow to a more normal rhythm. The sweet smell that had been on her breath started to fade. Within an hour, all 17 children were showing improvement. Within 3 hours, the children who had been on ventilators were breathing on their own. By evening, the entire group was conscious, alert, and asking for their parents. The recovery was so complete and so dramatic that it made international news. "Miracle at Children's Hospital. Traditional medicine saves 17 poisoned children," was the headline that appeared in newspapers around the world. But for Janelle, the real miracle wasn't the media attention or the scientific validation. It was the moment when 4-year-old Sarah Chen, the youngest of the poisoned children, tugged on her sleeve and said, "Thank you for making me better, lady." As Janelle knelt down to hug the little girl, she felt her grandmother's spirit surrounding them both. Sarah Williams had taught her granddaughter that healing was about more than just medicine. It was about love, caring, and never giving up on people who needed help. The knowledge had traveled from rural Alabama to a children's hospital, from one generation to the next, from traditional wisdom to modern application. And in that journey, it had saved 17 precious lives. The miracle was complete, but Janelle knew it was just the beginning of something much larger. 6 months after the miraculous recovery of the 17 children, Janelle Williams stood before an audience of 500 medical professionals at the International Conference on Traditional Medicine. She wore a simple blue dress that her grandmother would have been proud of, and on the podium beside her were samples of the healing plants that had changed everything. "When I was 8 years old," she began, "my grandmother took me for a walk in the woods behind our house in Alabama. She pointed to a small mint plant growing beside the creek and said, 'Janelle, child, that little plant knows how to save lives. But it can't save anyone unless somebody knows how to listen to what it's trying to teach.'" The audience listened in rapt attention as Janelle told the story of how traditional plant knowledge had saved Robert Sterling's life, prevented her own death, and ultimately rescued 17 children from exotic plant poisoning. But this wasn't just a story about miraculous cures, it was about the power of combining ancient wisdom with modern science. "My grandmother's knowledge didn't replace modern medicine," Janelle continued. "It enhanced it. When 10 of the country's best doctors couldn't figure out how to help Mr. Sterling, they didn't give up, they opened their minds to knowledge that came from a different source. That's what real medicine looks like. Using every tool available to help people heal." In the audience, Dr. Harrison and Dr. Blackstone exchanged glances of pride. Both men had become strong advocates for the traditional knowledge research program, which had grown far beyond anything they had initially imagined. Dr. Blackstone had published several papers on the chemical compounds found in Janelle's plant remedies, including the isolation of Compound J, which was now being developed as a commercial antidote for exotic plant poisonings. Dr. Harrison had established partnerships with medical schools around the world to study traditional healing practices. But perhaps the most significant change had come from Robert Sterling himself. The experience of nearly dying and then being saved by traditional knowledge had fundamentally altered his perspective on business and life. After Janelle's presentation, she joined Robert for lunch at the conference. They had developed a close friendship over the past year, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "I have something to tell you," Robert said as they sat down. "I've made a decision about the future of Sterling Technologies." Janelle looked at him curiously. "What kind of decision?" "I'm restructuring the entire company around the principles you've taught me. We're going to focus on projects that combine traditional knowledge with modern technology to solve problems that affect people's daily lives." "That sounds wonderful, but what does it mean practically?" Robert's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "It means we're going to build the world's first integrated research center for traditional and modern medicine. We're going to create partnerships with indigenous communities around the world to preserve their knowledge while ensuring they benefit from any discoveries. And we're going to train a new generation of healers who understand both ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science." Janelle felt tears forming in her eyes. "Robert, that's incredible. But it must be costing you a fortune." "Actually, it's making me richer than I've ever been," he replied. "Not financially, though the company is doing well, but in terms of purpose and meaning. I used to measure success by stock prices and profit margins. Now I measure it by lives saved and knowledge preserved." As they talked about the future of the program, Janelle's phone buzzed with a text message that made her smile. It was from Mary Crow Feather. "My grandson graduated from medical school today. He wants to specialize in botanical medicine. Your work inspired him to become a bridge between the old ways and the new ways." "Good news?" Robert asked, noticing her expression. "The best news. Mary's grandson is going to continue his family's healing tradition, but he's also going to be a medical doctor. He'll be able to work in both worlds." "That's exactly what we need more of. People who can serve as bridges between different ways of knowing." Over the next hour, they discussed the specific plans for the new research center. It would be located on a large campus that included traditional healing gardens, modern laboratories, and residences for visiting healers and researchers from around the world. The center would offer training programs for medical professionals who wanted to learn about traditional remedies, and it would provide support for indigenous communities working to preserve their botanical knowledge. "I want you to be the director," Robert said as their lunch was ending. Janelle was surprised by the offer. "Me? But I don't have the credentials to run a major research institution." "You have something more valuable than credentials." You have wisdom, and you have the trust of the communities whose knowledge we need to preserve. Besides, he added with a smile, we'll surround you with all the scientific and administrative support you need. As Janelle considered the offer, she thought about her grandmother's dreams for her. Sarah Williams had always encouraged her granddaughter to use her education and abilities to help people. But she had also understood the limitations that poverty and prejudice could place on a young black woman's opportunities. Now, Janelle had the chance to create opportunities not just for herself, but for countless others whose knowledge had been dismissed or overlooked. She could build something that would honor her grandmother's memory while helping people around the world. "I'll take the job," she said finally, "but I have some conditions." "Name them." "First, any community that shares knowledge with us gets a percentage of any profits from discoveries based on that knowledge. Second, we train healers from those communities to work in our research center so they're partners, not just sources of information. Third, we make all our research freely available to any doctor or healer who wants to use it to help people." Robert extended his hand. "Deal, when can you start?" 6 months later, the Sterling Center for Traditional and Modern Medicine opened its doors with great fanfare. The campus was beautiful, featuring gardens filled with medicinal plants from around the world, laboratories equipped with the latest research technology, and comfortable quarters for visiting healers and researchers. Janelle's first day as director was both exciting and overwhelming. She walked through the gardens in the early morning, checking on plants that ranged from her grandmother's healing mint to Tibetan sky root to dozens of other species that had been donated by traditional healers from 6 continents. In one of the laboratories, Dr. Blackstone and his team were analyzing compounds from a tree bark remedy used by Amazon healers to treat respiratory infections. In another, Dr. Vasquez was working with a Maasai elder to cultivate drought-resistant medicinal plants that could survive climate change. The residential wing housed 23 traditional healers from around the world, each working with modern researchers to document and study their family's knowledge. Mary Crow Feather had been one of the first to arrive, and she had brought her grandson, now Dr. Thomas Crow Feather, to serve as a bridge between Cherokee healing traditions and modern medical practice. But perhaps the most meaningful space in the entire center was a small room that Janelle had dedicated to her grandmother's memory. The walls were lined with Sarah Williams' journals, and in the center of the room was a desk where Janelle worked on her own documentation project, a comprehensive guide to plant medicine that would combine traditional knowledge from around the world. On this first day, Janelle found a letter waiting on the desk in her grandmother's memorial room. The envelope was simple, with her name written in careful handwriting that she didn't recognize. Inside was a note from Emma Chen, the 7-year-old girl whose life Janelle had saved with the shield remedy over a year ago. "Dear Ms. Janelle, my mom says you saved my life with plants. I want to learn about plants too so I can help people like you did. My teacher says I'm too young to understand, but I know that plants are special because they helped me. When I grow up, I want to work with you at your plant hospital. Love, Emma. P.S. I grew some mint in my backyard, and it smells just like the medicine you made for me." Janelle felt tears streaming down her face as she read the letter. This was why she did this work, not for the recognition or the scientific accolades, but for children like Emma who would grow up understanding that healing could come from unexpected places, and that wisdom was worth preserving and sharing. She walked to the window and looked out at the gardens where healers and scientists were working together, where ancient knowledge and modern research were combining to create new possibilities for healing. In the distance, she could see Robert Sterling walking with Dr. Harrison, both men animated as they discussed some new project or discovery. As the sun set over the center, Janelle whispered a quiet thank you to her grandmother. Sarah Williams had planted seeds of knowledge in her granddaughter's mind and heart, and those seeds had grown into something beautiful and life-giving that would continue to help people for generations to come. The cleaning lady's miracle had become something much larger, a new beginning for the way the world thought about healing, wisdom, and the power of bringing different kinds of knowledge together in service of helping people. And in a small garden beside the main building, healing mint grew strong and fragrant, ready to save lives whenever someone who knew how to listen could hear what it was trying to teach.
Dear listeners,
Thank you for joining Janelle on her incredible journey from night shift cleaning lady to director of a groundbreaking research center. This story celebrates the wisdom that exists in unexpected places and the power of bringing different kinds of knowledge together to help people heal. As you reflect on Janelle's story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever encountered traditional remedies or folk wisdom in your own family or community? What do you think about the idea of combining ancient knowledge with modern science? Which moment in Janelle's journey resonated most with you? Do you believe there are other areas where traditional wisdom might enhance modern practices? Your comments and insights help bring stories like this to life and might inspire others who read about Janelle's remarkable transformation.